On today's episode of the High Not to Laugh podcast, I'm going to tell my son what it was like to celebrate Halloween in the 80s as a Gen X person, and you're Gen Z, and you are?
Hi.
Welcome to the High Not to Laugh podcast.
Who am I?
Well, I'm getting there.
Okay.
To my right is the trick to my treat.
Jason. Yeah.
See, I try to make them have something to do with the episode.
A trick to my treat.
Yeah. All right. So, and I actually shout out to my buddy Josh, who you've met. He's the one that
He gave us the century eggs.
He did give you the century egg. Didn't give us because I'm not eating one of them.
You are. There's still 2 left.
And they'll stay left.
And they'll survive forever.
No. Anyway, and I was like, hey, I've got this list. And he's like, oh, what about this? So, like, he helped me with the list. So, shout out to Josh Anderson. Anyway, the first thing I'm going to talk about is Ben Cooper masks and plastic ponchos.
Yes.
These were the costumes of the late 70s, early 80s that everybody bought. And as you can tell, it's a
Wait a minute.
It's a thin plastic mask that has a rubber band that goes behind your head. There's a feeling of the plastic cutting into your skin and the smell of the plastic that I will never, ever forget. And you wear basically a rain poncho, a cheap dollar store one.
With his face and fists on it?
Uh-huh. Most of them came with a poncho that also had the face of who you were. It took a while. They did that with Superman, but then they released one a little later that had the S on the chest because it made more sense. But they had a Luke Skywalker one that was Luke's face, and it had Luke holding up a lightsaber on his chest, and it just said Star Wars. It didn't say Luke Skywalker. It said,
I shouldn't have said anything.
So you could go as Star Wars.
Well, heck yeah.
They had a Ghostbusters one where the plastic mask was the ghost from the emblem, and then on your chest was the emblem.
Well, heck yeah.
Who goes as the emblem to Ghostbusters?
Who goes as Hulk
I'm
with
going
Hulk's
as
own
the
face?
sticker on the side of the car. They were awesome and awful because, like, Casper, if you actually look for some of these later, go back when you're watching this back and actually look up some of these, because Casper was creepy looking.
Ooh.
And he's supposed to be
He's a ghost,
but he's friendly.
He's a dead child.
Well, so yeah, they definitely didn't have Spirit Halloween back then.
No.
And, these things...
You wouldn't know it from the way that you seem to have grown up, but...
Well, because of all the horror stuff I have? Yeah. Well, they started getting, party stores and stuff like that, too. And
Fangoria.
Fangoria was a magazine, but yeah.
But, they're big.
Oh, most people my age tried to put up centerfolds from certain magazines.
And
mine were Fangoria.
That's so...
I had a Freddy poster.
People were probably worried about you.
I had a Nightmare on Elm Street 4 poster that was the actual poster, from the theater.
So it was backwards too?
No.
Oh.
This one wasn't double-sided, but it came from...
the theater.
And I had it hung on my wall. I also had a Batman one from, I think it was Batman
89?
Returns, and that one was backwards.
But that would almost not make a difference?
Well, it made a big difference because it had all the words backwards, and I had it on a wall, and on the other side I had a mirror, so when you looked in the mirror, it was right.
Yeah. Which is a little...
Yeah. But that has nothing to do with Halloween. That was just my everyday decor.
Yeah, well.
The next thing I'm going to talk about is buckets from McDonald's.
Oh,
now,
yeah.
we've talked about these before when we're talking about McDonald's toys and stuff.
They're kind of doing this again.
They brought them back again, but the ones in the 80s were bigger. They really were. And kids would bring them to, like I said, to the beach because the handles were sturdy. Like, you had to purposely yank them off. Like, they weren't chintzy. Like, they held up well. Some kids used them multiple years.
I mean, they look like something good. Like, they look fine, you know?
And that was the original one.
I've got at a large superstore, all right, that we shop at frequently. I remember me and my siblings all got what kind of looked like that with the design of the orange and the faces, but like they were pumpkin shaped, and there were these tiny little buckets that we were supposed to bring around and put the candy in, and they were just the worst things.
Well, they didn't hold a lot.
They didn't.
Okay, so that's those. And now I'm going to talk about something that they still technically do, but I never heard you kids bring these home. UNICEF.
Yeah.
UNICEF boxes were the biggest thing in the 80s. You were supposed to, at the time, it was instead of going around for candy, you were supposed to ask for change.
Yeah.
Your Uncle Travis, let me tell you a story about his UNICEF days. He got a bunch of money. Some people were given dollar bills and stuff, you know, and this was in the 80s when you were making, you know, $6 an hour if you were full-time and, like, had been working a while. That wasn't minimum wage. That was, like, a good wage.
Like, wow.
Yeah. So $1 was, like, a chunk of time. Well, your Uncle Travis gets home, counts it all out, looks up at your grandfather and says, "There's quite a lot here. I'm willing to give half of it to the school." And my dad had to tell him, "No, it all goes to the school." He's like, "Why don't I get any? I did all the work." They're like, No. It's for charity. He had to be told, like, you don't get to keep some of that. He was like...
I totally get his attitude, you know? Like, so I just spent my time that I could have been getting candy.
Oh, no. Here's the thing. We also did both.
Oh, okay.
We're like, candy. Oh, and by the way, got a nickel? Like...
Yeah, no, they gave us the UNICEF box at my school every single year, and you know what every kid I knew did?
Together,
yep, and they would do that as a participation thing in class because they didn't know if the kids would be able to figure it out when they got home. And then almost every single one of us threw it away before we got outside. I wasn't going to give up my candy for money. No.
Understandable. The next one, Halloween specials. You recognize that?
I do. The Great Pumpkin.
Pumpkin? The Great Pumpkin?
The Great Pumpkin.
Is that how you're going to be a father?
The Great Pumpkin batch.
The so-so pumpkin? The quick pumpkin? The quick pump? It wasn't even a pump-in.
That was Charlie Brown from, I thought it was the 60s.
That
Charlie
was.
Brown stuff. Okay.
But they played it every year.
Okay.
Understand, in the 80s, they had a Halloween special for Garfield. They had, the Grinch had a Halloween special.
As he should.
Yeah, except he was a bad guy again, and it took place, I hope, I don't remember, 'cause it wasn't one that, like, Grinch was Christmas, you know? But I like... Disney had stuff. Warner Brothers would put together like old cartoons where it was with a witch
like
or a monster.
thing, right.
You know, the red monster with all the hair and the witch hazel.
Yeah.
They would put those together and have a Halloween special.
Right.
Where it was just...
Not a coherent thing, but a bunch of funny stuff happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was just a way to put like 6
old
or 7
stuff out
old
again.
ones. Yeah.
It's like, wait a second. We don't have to do new stuff. We could just do this old stuff.
But you'll never know because it's so different now with people owning hard copies and streaming and all these things. Like, if Halloween was a Tuesday and you wanted to see the Great Pumpkin, like, you saw it when it aired.
Right.
There was no DVR. You could put in a blank tape and record it for later, but there was something about hearing the intro music to the special and like running into the room with your bowl of popcorn and...
Yeah, I get the idea of that, even though I never had to go through that. Obviously, it's the most Gen Z version of this, unfortunately. I usually try to go, oh yeah, I liked that X version of things, but... it's actually rather annoying. Like, me and Caitlin are watching weekly. Marvel's got a new show that they're doing it's October, spooky season. It's about witches. And she told me the other day when we were watching it, this is really annoying because I've never had to deal with at the end of the episode. Now I've got to wait.
I mean, she saw the first episode of The Simpsons this year, and she has to wait till Sunday for the next one.
I have to assume that that's part of why she was fighting against watching it at the time, because it means waiting till next week.
Well, anyway, now different rules were considered at the time. Different things were okay. We had different rules. For example, you see that kid? Those kids dressed as Native Americans?
Oh, okay.
Those would be considered very, very...
offensive.
Uh-huh.
That's... okay, whatever, I don't care. But like...
you know how many kids just put a feather and a, headband...
and call it macaroni?
And a vest and, walk around and going... "Ay, la, 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 ay, la." Nobody cared. And as...
you know what video is not getting monetized?
What, this one? I'm... Abenaki. It's in my blood. I'm allowed to reference these things, but here's the thing. I don't care if other people did either.
Right, whatever. Do what you want to do, and if I think that it's distasteful, then I get to make the decision that I don't like what you're doing, and I'm going to not be with you, okay? I'm not going to walk with you if I'm offended by your costume. I can make that choice for myself. I'll scroll past the post if I don't like it.
Men dress your uncle dressed as a girl, and his favorite thing, he did it one or two times, and he loved blowing up a balloon for here and a balloon for here and putting on a dress and a wig, and it was not offensive to anybody. They were like, "Oh, well, whatever." Now, we weren't allowed to do the blackface stuff. I'm okay with that.
I get it,
I'm okay with that. It was never anything I was interested in.
Obviously, that picture of the two kids that were dressed like that, what didn't they have? Brown paint.
Right.
They just had the feathers. They had the thing over their chest. Right. There's no paint except for what looks like war paint from here. All right. There was nothing meant to be insensitive about this. They weren't thinking, "Oh, this is bad." What they were thinking is, "This is the thing I find cool, and I'm gonna pay my homage to it."
Well, Adam Carolla, back during this time, said that he went as Mr. T. He literally shaved his head into the
afro.
No, the mohawk.
And
he did color his skin.
Yeah.
But he was like, I wasn't trying to make fun. He's like, if you look at blackface, they're making fun. He's like, I wanted to be Mr. T. I
Mr.
thought
T's cool.
He's like, that dude was cool.
He was B.A. Baracus, all right?
Right? He's like, I don't think people understood that. Now...
I don't know. Jimmy Kimmel was playing Karl Malone, right? Robert Downey Jr. was playing Black Robert Downey Jr.
Well, that was odd. But yeah, there's context to it.
Right.
But, nowadays...
rules are rules, and we just don't do that anymore, obviously.
Exactly.
But,
also, the next one. We went out with just our friends, sometimes an older sibling, no parents. That would be the groups you'd see walking around. The parents stayed home and handed out candy to other people's kids.
Yeah.
You didn't...
That seems right, though,
It does, but you can also see the fear
now it's a problem. But it's I don't know.
And I have one on the list that's coming up that will explain when that started changing. Oh, look, it's the next thing. News stories would freak out families about people putting needles and razor blades into candy. Yep.
I'm not reading all that.
But... Now, some people did actually try putting needles and razor blades and stuff in stuff. There are some examples.
Yeah.
But there was also a big thing when I lived at Westgate, and it was nationwide, the Satanic Panic, they called it.
Yeah.
There was supposedly some people that were sacrificing cats or whatever at Westgate, and that's when the parents were like, we're going to walk with our kids because it's dangerous out there. So that's when that really started to change.
Yeah.
I would say that was probably 88, 89.
That sounds accurate. That's just... Yeah, I mean... it makes sense, you know.
The next two have the same
kid.
picture. A lot of kids had eggs, TP, and shaving cream that they would carry with them once they got a little bit older in TP places. But
I never understood it.
to tie that into around here, the reality is there was, we called it Cabbage Night
Cabbage night?
in Brattleboro. It was
Okay.
called Cabbage Night. And I guess that's a New England thing for the most part. And I guess around the Great Lakes, they call it that too. Not sure why.
I thought it was
We never had-
Devil's Night.
Well, there are places that call it Devil's Night. There's Mischief Night. And usually it's the night after or the night before, but it's not the night of Halloween.
Right.
So sometimes the older kids would have shaving cream and stuff on Halloween. Sometimes it was on Cabbage Night, Mischief Night, whatever you called it. But kids were also getting caught with those things and getting in trouble too.
Right.
And the last thing is in Brattleboro, every year in Brattleboro, Vermont, we had the Horribles Parade. Okay. And they still do it, but it was a bigger deal back then. Every kid in all of Brattleboro wanted to be in that thing. You just showed up with your costume and you walked from, I don't remember, I think we usually started down where the co-op is, that parking lot, and we'd walk up Main Street until like the end of Main Street.
Where the cow thing
No,
was.
you know where the that roundabout is?
Yes.
Okay, that's usually where we would end.
Yeah.
And everybody would,
Commons.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was a huge deal. Like everybody wanted in on
Yeah,
that.
heck, we were just going through
Like-
old photo books and found a picture from when I was in elementary school wearing my Thing mask and costume. It was what I consider the old costume of uncomfortable plastic mask.
But it had a
and, like,
poofy muscles built
muscle
in suit.
suits.
Yep.
Yeah, and you could always tell that it was like a little too big for the kid that was wearing it.
So that's the 10 things I wanted to tell you about. Now, you've heard about some of that stuff before,
Yeah.
like the buckets, and you've definitely
And
seen some
I've
of the
seen some of
Cooper
those
masks.
old masks, and
You've definitely seen the Great Pumpkin,
I've definitely seen the Great Pumpkin. I mean, everybody's seen the Great Pumpkin.
and you've heard stories about the candy, but did you ever hear about the supposed slaughtering of cats?
I did.
Oh,
I did. That
okay.
that came back right around the time I was in middle school, still living there.
Remember when the clown thing happened a few years ago? That'll be
Oh,
one
my
that you'll be doing a podcast with your kid when he's older.
Yeah, you wouldn't believe that.
But I guess that's the podcast for this week. And as always, I want to smoke your bud.